Greetings. This video is going to go over the peer review process. Now, for major writing assignments and writing projects or anything that requires a peer review, this is the foundation for how the peer review process will work in most of my online classes, like this one. All right, so the first thing you want to be aware of is that the peer review process is collaborative. It needs everyone to participate to get work done, which means there is no substitute. So for assignments that require you to rely on other people in the class, I don't have any way to substitute for that. So if you miss it, I don't have a nice, clean, hey, you can get all those points. It just doesn't exist. So there is no substitute. If you don't provide a draft for an assignment that requires a peer review draft before you submit it, you cannot submit a final version of that assignment for grading. That means you will get 0 points. Now, I do have, some workaround, but the best thing to do is to get in here, figure out the peer review process, let's get through the kinks and make it your point to participate in the peer review process. So what you're gonna need to do is review the documents related to the peer review process, ask questions about them. And once you have written your draft and you're ready to share it, there's some information here on preparing and posting your draft online so that it can be reviewed. And then I have this section here about what to do if you do not post a draft. So I will go over that in a little more detail. All right, so as far as the documents you want to review, I have attached them here. The process that I'm talking about right now, you can get in a PDF version, or you can just read what's on the screen here. And then you have the draft, the peer review draft job description. So this document basically is the foundation, is the anchor assignment sheet for how we think about the draft peer review process. I call it a job. So I've given it to you in this job like description format. And so you want to review the job you're being asked to do. Mainly, you are going to be asked to give each other feedback in a way that does not ask you to proofread and edit people's spelling and error. No, you're asking to give critical feedback. So you're gonna wanna review the job description. And then once you give and receive feedback, you have to demonstrate that you've looked at that feedback, you're trying to figure out how to use that feedback to improve your writing. And so the next thing you have to create is this item called a draft review memo. This item comes directly to me. This handout gives you the prompts that you need to address. And if you scroll all the way through it, it gives you an example of a draft review memo. Now, don't let this example freak you out too much, because this example comes from a later project that was a research writing project. So this student had a lot to say. As you can imagine, as you get through the course, and each larger assignment that you get to will require you to do more work. But this gives you an idea for what a memo looks like. You know, a memo, this is also another way to get you to practice another type of form or genre of writing, which is memo writing. You find this in the business world. Memos look the same. You can go online and get templates, but memos are designed to communicate information. They're informative pieces of writing. The people who get them, they can see what the topic is, who sent it, who they sent it to, and what the topic is. So it's pretty much like email. So emails gives you that heading information, and sometimes people will skip over emails depending on what you write in that subject line. But these are informative pieces of writing. This document helps me know how you use the draft review session and gives me an idea for the kinds of writing decisions you're making. So you have the overall process, the draft review, the job description, and then the memo. These other items here are supplementary information. So for example, How to give feedback, I giving you an example of a document of one way to give feedback. Now, in our draft review sessions, yes, you have to actually download your classmates' papers. That's why it's important that you submit your papers on time. You're going to download their documents, and you actually have to make comments in and on their documents. So this is an example of how one student used the comment feature in Word, and that's also a comment feature in Google Docs. But remember, if you're using Google Docs, you have to download it and save it as a Word doc. But this is an example of using the comments to give feedback and also writing up additional information. So you have this as an example. The most important thing is when you give feedback, the writer needs to be able to understand it. The additional documents here. So let's say for some reason you don't post your own draft, and so you don't get feedback. Well, that's a problem because you won't be able to submit your paper for grading if you don't demonstrate you had a draft. So you practice what you're doing and you got feedback on it so that you can improve it. So yes, there is a substitute for that. You can get feedback from a GRCC writing tutor or from the instructor. Both of these will require you to find some additional time to make appointments and then be prepared to work with the tutor or the instructor to get the feedback that you need, because neither one of these people will be able to give you feedback like your peers because they're not part of the peer review, learning environment. And so if you're going to get feedback because you did not post your own draft and you didn't receive feedback, you also need to use the Rafuth chapter on how to get feedback from the Writing Center. And I believe, yep. So here is the link to that chapter. Rafuth is an essay from the Writing Spaces text about using your Writing Center. And then you also need to complete the tutor form if you work with a GRCC tutor or if you work with the instructor. And this is an example. So you have the tutor form, you have the chapter by Rafuth, and you also have an example of how to fill out the tutor form. So those are all the documents in the peer review process. So keep this in mind. Just participate in peer review and then you don't have to figure out the substitute. The other thing I strongly suggest is get help from everyone. So try to schedule a time that you will participate in the peer review process and get help from the writing lab and your instructor. Put all of that to work for you. And then when you do get help from additional sources, yes, you're going to include that information in your draft review memo. So that's the basic approach to the writing, the peer review process. And also pay attention because each specific writing project will likely have specific items you need to look at or look for when you're doing peer review. Because this job description is basically the basics for what you're looking for, but each writing assignment has specific tools and techniques that you need to address. Now, one other thing I want to point out is that to figure out how to use the writing lab, there is a link here on Blackboard that takes you to the writing lab instructions, right? So you click on that and it'll take you to the language arts tutorial lab. And from there, you need to follow these directions in order to get online help from the Writing Center. And so I'm going to go ahead and add that to this video so that you know. So in order to get this help as it's presented right now, you need to log on to Blackboard, which I already am logged on to Blackboard. Right, so when you're logged on to Blackboard, you have to actually scroll down till you see My Organizations. This is what the instructions are telling you. And I have lots of stuff on my Blackboard because I'm in a lot of different groups. So my organizations, and then you're looking for the Language Arts Online Tutorial Lab. Click this link, and that will give you directions for getting tutorial help for reading and writing. And then you will follow the information here, and they have their hours of operation. So just like my office hours, just because there's a Zoom link doesn't mean someone's sitting there. You need to pay attention to when the place is actually open. So you can scroll through here and see what their tutoring schedules are, and then you use their Zoom link. And so that's my overview for the peer review process.